Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we talk about firefighter and paramedic line of duty deaths to learn from these tragic events and potentially prevent them from happening in the future. I'm your host, Paul, and I'm joined by my co-hosts today, Doug and Denny. How's it going, Doug and Denny?
It's going good for me. I'm happy to be here again. Missed an episode or two with my busy life and taking courses and working shifts and extra shifts and whatever. So finally a day off, I can be here.
Yeah. Excellent. Kids are good?
Kids are good. Kids are busy. Kids are funny. Kids are a handful. Everything's good though. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And the Oilers are winning, so now we can talk about them.
For now, yeah, 3 in a row. We'll see.
Last time you told me don't bring it up or something.
So things are better now for sure. Yeah, but we still got a long way to go.
Awesome.
He's over the pain.
The pain never really goes away. It's always waiting to come back.
I like it.
You could be a Leafs fan.
Yeah,
that's right. Could be worse. That's right. And Denis, how are you?
I'm good. I'm keeping busy. You know, the fall's coming, right? So, things to do outside, things to do inside. Spending more time in my office than I'd like, but that's okay. Working out proposals for clients and so forth. So I'm supposed to be retired, but, I keep busy.
Nice. That's good. Well, yeah, you got to keep busy, right? Same with me. I was teaching ICS yesterday and the day before, 200 online for Nate. And last week I went and did a really big exercise out in Vancouver, an oil spill exercise, helped facilitate that. Next week I'm going to Regina to do some sort of a industrial exercise. And the week after I'm teaching Greek guys. 6 firefighters from Greece have come over for the month to Nate, and they're doing a whole bunch of command training and comms training and wildfire training, and so it's kind of cool. So I'm teaching ICS 400 up there for them week after next.
I'm sure they're nice and warm here too, coming to Canada in November.
Yeah, probably. I haven't. A friend of mine is doing a bunch of other courses. He's been filling me in, but I suppose they've been busy. They went out to Banff, and the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association's been hosting him with some stuff, and which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Found out yesterday that another one of my friends has got esophageal cancer.
No way.
Yeah, he just got diagnosed last week. So, as you get further on in this, more and more of your people are getting cancer, and some of them are not surviving it. So, if you're a firefighter, be careful.
There was just a battalion chief from New York just died this week from 9/11 World Trade Center cancer. He did something like 42 or 43 years in the fire department. Didn't collect one pension check before he died. Retired and died right away.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If you've seen that CNN special, Nobody Left Behind, it's about the 9/11 and, really, I would say the non-surviving survivors. It's a real tearjerker. It's really hard to watch. It's a couple of years old now, but it's really worth watching. So it brings it all home. And teaches you about the fundamental heartlessness of government. Anyway, on that cheery note.
Yeah, really, no kidding. Well, in this whole PFAS thing that's going on with the foam and the turnout gear, and how do we teach our firefighters not to wear their turnout gear absolutely unless they have to for fires? But wearing it around the station or for a rooftop camp out or extra exposure to turnout gear is bad because the fluorines are coming off, rubbing off the turnout gear as you wear it, and they're everywhere in the stations and stuff. And actually, there's no replacement yet. They're trying to change the standard, and it's the hydrophobic properties that they're trying to replace without the fluorines. And then the foam in Canada, really, people don't even know about C6 and fluorine foam yet. It's just in the States, some states are actually going and picking up foam from the fire stations and disposing of it for the municipalities. But in Canada, it's sort of just people are only learning about it now.
Well, I don't know. You got to be living under a rock to not know about this stuff, honestly.
I asked. I was with a firefighter. I did a thing that exercise I did last week with a firefighter that was one of the facilitators in his metropolitan department. I asked him, "What kind of foam do you use?" I don't know. It's like, okay, and he's a
He
captain.
uses the foam that's in the foam jug that shows up on the truck when they say they need more foam.
Exactly. Well, they should educate themselves, I guess, or their union should be on top of it because it's a problem.
Well,
If their department's not on top of it, then
if that's your profession, I guess you should try to know everything you can about.
Which is why we're
everything
here.
you can.
Which is why we're here talking about these incidents, right?
Yeah.
Well, this week's incident on November 29th, we're going back a little ways, actually. The next two incidents that I've got slated are back in the 80s, but they were significant incidents when they happened and had long-term impacts on the fire service and some changes, hopefully, for the good. So this one here being the Kansas City explosion, where 6 firefighters died when responding to a construction site fire November 29th, 1988. The other one we're going to do in a few weeks is going to be the Breckenridge, Pennsylvania fire, where 4 firefighters died in a collapse of a building. It's similar to the Pang fire we did Seattle last May. Anyway, the explosion occurred at a highway construction site and claimed the lives of 6 Kansas City, Missouri firefighters. Investigators determined that the 2 fires were deliberately set, and the material that detonated was an ammonium nitrate-based blasting agent. Of course, we know about ammonium nitrate from other explosions that have occurred from that, and we'll talk about that here as we move forward. Some of those other ones, significant ones.
All right, the Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department, because there's 2 Kansas cities.
Yeah,
Kansas
that's
City,
right.
Missouri
I learned
Fire
that
Department.
when I went there. I learned that,
and I think they're vastly different from what I understand.
Across the river, but different. Yes,
but different. Anyways, the fire department protects 320 square mile community with a population of 448,000 people. 751 operations officers and firefighters are divided between 3 24-hour shifts. Each shift has 7 battalion chiefs and 1 deputy chief. An additional battalion chief supervises the firefighters assigned to protect the Kansas City International Airport. In addition to operations personnel, the fire department has 45 personnel in administrative, clerical, fire prevention, dispatch, and training positions. During the fiscal year ending on April 30th, 1988, the fire department responded to 25,353 calls. Of those, 11,000 were medical, 5,000 were fire, and the rest included false alarms, good intentions, service, hazardous conditions, and miscellaneous responses. The department has 32 fire stations throughout the city, operates 33 pumpers, 7 squads, and 15 trucks, which include 3 quints, 1 aerial platform, and 11 ladder trucks. The pumpers are typically staffed with an officer, a fire apparatus operator, and a firefighter, so 3. The squads have a 2 firefighter crew, and the trucks typically have 4 personnel. So their squads must be like a medical response kind of thing, maybe. I don't know.
maybe ambulance.
With only 2 people.
Yeah.
The Kansas City Fire Department SOP for handling hazardous materials that was in effect at the time of the explosion was dated March 1st, 1981. This 12-page document outlines the duties and responsibilities of dispatchers, the officer who arrives first at the scene, the incident commander, and others. Among the many procedures, the SOP states that, quote, the dispatcher will obtain answers to as many questions on FD 100 as possible, end quote, and she will convey by radio, as the companies are en route, such information as the amount and type of material involved, the type and size of the container, etc. The SOP also states that the first officer on scene will advise other responding units of the situation and precautions to be taken, and notify the dispatcher by radio of situational and action taken. The Kansas City Fire Department SOP for handling hazardous materials that was in effect at the time of the explosion was dated March 1st, 1981. This 12-page document outlines the duties and responsibilities of the dispatcher's officer, the officer who arrives first at the scene, the incident commander, and others. Among the many procedures, the SOP states that the dispatcher will obtain answers to as many questions on FD 100 as possible, and she will convey by radio, as the companies are en route, such information as the type and amount of material involved, the type and amount of the size of the container. The SOP also states that the first officer on scene will advise other responding units of the situation and precautions to be taken, and to notify the dispatcher by radio of the situation and the action taken.
Yeah, exactly. So FD 100 must be their dispatch system, right? FD Fire Dispatch. It's probably their card system in those days.
Yeah.
Training and experience of the fire department. When an individual is selected to be a Kansas City firefighter, he or she is required to complete 3-month introduction to firefighting course. The course is fashioned after the firefighter training courses developed by the NFPA, or National Fire Academy, and introduces personnel to firefighting procedures, fire prevention activities, and to the department's standard operating procedures, SOPs, such as the one for hazardous materials. I wanted to note that the information in this podcast, it comes from a National Fire Protection Association report. They did their own investigation and report on this event because it was a milestone in the fire service and hazardous materials and transportation of hazardous materials because it involved some construction trailers. So that's where this all came from. The 6 firefighters that were killed had received the department's introductory hazardous materials training course. In addition, 4 of the 6 firefighters had received other hazardous materials field training. All 4 had completed the National Fire Academy course called Recognizing and Identifying Hazardous Materials. In addition, 2 of the 4, an officer and a firefighter, had completed a second National Fire Academy course, Hazardous Material Incident Analysis. In addition to their training, the 6 firefighters had many years of experience. The officer on the first arriving pumper had been on the department for 29 years. The operator and the firefighter on this pumper also had 12 and 20 years of experience, respectively. The officer on the second pumper had 38 years experience, and the operator and firefighter had been on the department for 10 and 15 years, respectively. So, of course, 1988, early 1001, old 472 training, that kind of stuff. That's what was going on back then. You probably remember that.
It's crazy that the officer on the second pumper had 38 years of experience. So he got on the fire department in 1950. By the time 1988 rolled around. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, just to put this into perspective, in the mid-late 80s, I remember we were just starting to have some really serious conversations about hazmat and how we were going to do hazmat and whether we needed to focus on hazmat and whether we needed particular capabilities for hazmat. And I wrote a significant report for my fire department on that at the time and made suggestions on how we would proceed. 1989 is the first year for NFPA 492, Standard of Competency for Responders to Hazmat Incidents. And as I recall back then, I don't even think awareness, operations, and technician were recognized terms. I think it was like level 1 and level 2 or something along those lines.
Something like that. 472 was the number, yeah. And then eventually they rolled it into your 1001 level 1 and 2. You had to have 472. You had to take it because of incidents like this where the risk was so high. There used to be a video in Canada. I remember the video from my first fire service. It was 86, 88, somewhere in there. I remember watching this video, and they had done a video about all the different types of hazardous materials that we got to watch, and that was your orientation,
hazmat
basically.
during the 80s, as I recall. There was the Buffalo one where a bunch of guys lost their lives with a propane tank.
Yes.
There was a big refinery fire, and a few guys lost their lives with that, and a few others that I'm sure would come back to me if I would Google them. And I remember them at the time. That scared the hell
Right,
out of us.
exactly. Like, man,
All of us, because we were going, what's going on, man?
Yeah. On the year preceding this incident, actually, the Kansas City Fire Department had been assembling a hazardous materials response team. As we just talked about, it was getting to be a subject of some renown. I remember Saskatoon saying, like, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want a team. It's not our responsibility. By law, the carrier has to be responsible. And I remember discussing with the deputy fire chief, going, Chief, no, I mean, you're going to be the one there. They're not going to be here. You have to deal with it. And Parker was his name. I can't remember his first name. Deputy Chief Parker, and he was like adamant, we are not doing hazmat. And it's a city of 100,000 people at the time. Anyway,
it's coming to your door.
Yeah, exactly. 18 firefighters and at least 3 battalion chiefs had received supplemental training regarding hazardous materials incident handling. Trained firefighters were randomly assigned to different shifts and dispersed throughout the fire stations. However, every shift had one of the trained battalion chiefs. The department was in the process of equipping a truck for use for hazardous materials response vehicle. This truck was not yet operational at the time of the incident.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the site where this incident happened, and you'll have to bear with me because this is fairly long description, but try to get a picture in your head of where this went. There's some drawings of this, Paul, which I presume will be posted on the website.
Yeah,
you'll be able to go and have a look at these
on
drawings.
Facebook and Twitter feeds.
Right. But it's important from a situational awareness, and every one of these incidents, and pretty much we talked last time about how important communications is, but situational awareness is massively important also. So I'm going to try and describe for you the site where this happened, and see if you can picture in your mind how these guys approached this scene and how the site itself actually constrained what they could do. So this incident occurred on a rock excavation site that was approximately 9 miles south of the center of Kansas City, Missouri. So pretty close to a major metropolis. The site covered about 1/8 of a square mile. So that's not very large, but it was on property leased by the construction company. And the area was bordered by 2 thoroughfares. So there was highways or roads on either side of the site. The south side of the site faced 87th Street, which was a 2-lane road, and it's used by, close to 10,000 cars a day, so a fairly busy road. And on the west side of the site faced this 4-lane US 71. So this site's in a corner. The west side of the site faced this US 71 that carried an estimated 32,000 cars a day, so a fairly busy road also. This road had a median strip, so it's a divided highway, and there were several crossover roads and traffic lights. So this other street that was on the south side, 87th Street, would have crossed over 71. So this is your major access point for getting to the site. And the highway's on the west side of the site. So contractors for this project were under contract with the State Highway Department, and their job was to remove rock that was going to be used as fill material for a new state highway. So not an interstate, but a state highway. In order to reach the bedrock that they were seeking, which appeared to include both limestone and shale, the workers had to remove trees, vegetation, and the topsoil that was covering the rock. So you take that off several feet deep, and then you get to the rock. Once uncovered, blasting was necessary to break up the bedrock so it could be removed. The blasting subcontractor had been issued a permit for his work on September the 8th of 1988. Remember, this happened in 1988. And that was issued by the city engineer. And so that becomes an issue later. And they were going to be using an estimated 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of blasting agent every workday. So 4 to 5 tons of blasting agent.
Every day. That's a lot.
Every day. And we're not sure how long this is going on, but obviously going on for a while. So one of the work areas on the site was 50 to 75 feet above the grade of US 71, so above the highway. So it was a hillside. They're taken off this hillside. There were 2 access roads that allowed workers to drive their heavy equipment, bulldozers, loaders, earth movers, between the blasting site and the equipment parking area. And this is all on the west side of 71. Some of the dirt, small rocks, and other surface material from the blasting site had been piled along the western edge of the elevated work area and formed a long berm approximately 12 feet high, was 100 to 150 feet wide, and 250 feet long. Likely piled up to shield the highway from the blasting operations is how I would think that was done. So you got the highway, you got this high berm that is 50 to 75 feet or more above the highway, and then behind that you've got the area that they're blasting.
Yep, makes sense to me.
So there were several vehicles and pieces of equipment that were parked at the site and remained overnight to the east side of the berm. So the highway, the berm, and further east is where the equipment was kept. So on that site, there were 2 air-powered mobile drills. So those things you see with the Caterpillar tracks and kind of a crane-like device. Anybody out west would know what these look like, but you'll see them a lot. They're air-powered and they're used for drilling holes into the bedrock. And they were attached to a compressor, and nearby was a gasoline-powered light trailer. So, with elevating lights that would illuminate the area for work at night. In addition, there were 2 semi-trailers, not trucks, but the trailers were parked nearby. And there was also a pickup truck near one of the rear doors to one of the trailers. Reportedly, the trailer furthest from the berm, and we're going to call this trailer number 1, was a dual axle, 35-foot long, over-the-road semi-trailer. And this trailer had a couple rear doors and a side door for getting in and out of. And this trailer was used to store 17,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fuel oil, ANFO, ANFO. You will hear this. Same stuff Tim McVeigh used in his terrorist attack, and it's been used a lot because it's relatively easy to get, particularly in 1988. So 17,000 pounds, right? So you're talking 8.5 tons of ANFO, and then an aluminum mixture. So then ammonium nitrate with aluminum mixed, and which was kept in 5-inch diameter and 6-inch diameter bags, commonly called socks. So you would drill a hole in the rock and you'd push these socks down inside, right? So that's how they were used. And there was also 3,500 pounds of pure ANFO in 50-pound bags. And ANFO is classified as a blasting agent.
That's a lot of boom.
There's quite a lot of boom, and this is only trailer number 1. Reports indicated also that the other trailer number 2, was also a dual axle, fully enclosed, road-ready semi-trailer. But this trailer was a little larger. It was 38 feet long. The other one was 35. And it had doors at the rear, and it contained 30,000 pounds of ANFO, plus the ANFO aluminum mixture in 30-pound socks. So 15 tons. So 15 tons. So there was 25 tons of this explosives on site. 25 tons. It was indicated that both trailers had aluminum frame components for the cargo box. So it's a typical aluminum box. And there was sheet aluminum sides and the roof, like these trailers are. The trailers had interior wall surfaces that were lined with 1/4-inch plywood, up to 4 feet in height along the sides, and had wooden floors. Of course, one of the concerns would be to make sure that these trailers wouldn't cause sparks, right? So aluminum and plywood. The floor on the trailers used to haul explosives are typically 1.5-inch thick hardwood, and the screws are countersunk into the wood, again, so there's no sparking. Both trailers reportedly had 4 ventilation doors, so these would be weak points in the design. So if there was an explosion, in theory, these would blow out. I don't think that's what happened on this day. So there were 2 in the front and 2 in the rear. The trailers were reportedly 15 years old. They weren't insulated, and they were reportedly in good condition. So the manufacturer and supplier of the blasting agent actually owned the trailers. When a delivery was made, the driver for the manufacturer would leave the blasting agent in the trailer and park the trailer at the construction site. So it sounded like the trailers came in loaded and were left at the site. Reportedly, it was standard practice of the blasting agent manufacturer to comply with the DOT transportation requirements for placarding. So this would have been placarded, the diamonds, class 1 explosive, right? And when the trailers displayed those placards with blasting agent while traveling over the road. However, as was common at the time, when the trailers were parked at the scene, these placards were removed. And they had these fold-up placards, right? You would fold the panel over and reveal the placard that said, "Please drive safely." You used to see those on the road all the time, right? No placard, just the placard. The diamond said, "Please drive safely." So at the time, it was not practice to leave the placards on the trailers. This becomes an issue later. If you look at Table 6.3 of NFPA 495 for the manufacture, transportation, storage, and use of explosive materials, the 1985 version, the parked trailers are considered as Type 5 magazines, as long as they were weather resistant and were secured against theft. Since these trailers were enclosed cargo trailers in good repair, they would have met the weather resistance criterion. The explosive manufacturer indicated that the kingpin, the pin that tows the trailer, had a lock on it so somebody couldn't latch onto it and drive away with it, and that there were padlocks by the contractor that were kept on the trailer doors, so it met the security requirements in the standard. In addition to the trailers, there were 2 other magazines on site, and these are both painted yellow and were located further east of a large pile of trees, stumps, rocks, and other debris. These little magazines, as I'll tell you about them, these would be what they call ready-use magazines, probably restocked every day for what they needed. So one magazine was 5 feet by 5 feet by 5 feet, so not a very big box. And it was about 340 feet away from trailer 1, because the guys are going in and out of this magazine as they do blasting. So you want it well away from your major stock in case something goes wrong. And the second one was a little larger at 7 feet by 7 feet by roughly 8 feet high, and was again a metal box, and it was about 210 feet from trailer 1. One magazine contained 2,500 pounds of dynamite, and the other contained 2,000 blasting caps. So the dynamite and the blasting caps were required to be kept separate from each other. So that's what was being done here. There had been reports of vandals tampering with construction equipment on the site, so 2 security guards had been hired to patrol the area after working hours. Under normal conditions, 1 guard was responsible for watching the rock blasting area, and the other one was responsible for watching the contractor's equipment parked on the west side of US 71. Not in this but you can discover by reading about this incident, there was actually a housing estate not too far away from this site. So it was apparently not uncommon for people from there to be in or near this site.
A little bit more information about ammonium nitrate fuel oil mixture called ANFO. It is the most common explosive used in the United States. Over 2 billion pounds of ANFO were produced in 1975. Probably more now.
Billion with a B.
Billion, yep. This accounted for approximately 80% of the domestic commercial explosive market that year. Current estimates indicate that ANFO is now being used in 90% of all blasting operations in the United States, not using nitroglycerin materials. The storage of ANFO and other ammonium nitrate-based blasting agents is addressed by NFPA 495, as you've already said. Who invented TNT dynamite? Alfred Nobel the Nobel Peace Prize. In order to redeem himself, he gave all his money for this prize because he had made this very destructive chemical that was used in war. That was the primary use back in the early 1900s. ANFO is predominantly in the form of a prill, a small porous pellet, and mixed with fuel oil. It is usually a pre-mixed oxygen-balanced free-flowing mixture of about 94% ammonium nitrate prills and 6% number 2 diesel fuel oil. Other ANFO products are modification of this basic formula. Substances such as aluminum or coal are used in place of or in addition to the diesel fuel. The ANFO prill is crushed. The ANFO product is packaged in a water-resistant package for use in wet boreholes, the drill holes into the rock. Materials such as aluminum are added to ANFO to increase the general strength of the explosive. Different mixtures of ANFO are sometimes referred to as carbon nitrates, NCNs, or low-density blasting agents. Compared to nitroglycerin-based dynamite, the cost of ANFO is low, but this is not the only advantage that ANFO has as a blasting agent. It's less sensitive to shock and does not bum to detonation as easily as other nitroglycerin-based explosives. Yet, under proper conditions, ANFO can produce explosion pressures similar to TNT and explosion velocities similar to dynamite. While it doesn't burn readily, it can still burn and produce a detonation in a well-established fire. Some indicates that incipient fires involving blasting agents that are not confined can be fought with large amounts of water. Since ammonium nitrate is an oxidizer, the fires cannot be smothered. It makes its own oxygen. Water acts only to cool the burning mass to temperatures below ignition temperature. When fires develop beyond the incipient stage, the only safe method for handling the situation is to abandon direct firefighting methods and evacuate the area in anticipation of an explosion. The suggested evacuation distance is 2,000 feet in Section 7.16 of NFPA 495, indicates when fires cannot be controlled before reaching explosive materials, including ANFO, they should not be fought. Beirut, West Texas, same kind of thing. Similarly, the Bureau of Explosives and the Department of Transportation state that firefighters should not fight fires that directly involve ANFO or other explosive materials. Instead, fire service persons should withdraw to a safe distance.
Paul, I looked up the chemical composition of ANFO, and I think it's interesting because people need to understand what they're dealing with here. And so ANFO is leaving out the FO, the fuel oil part of it. It's ammonium nitrate, which means it's composed of ammonia and nitrates. So the formula is NH4, which is ammonia, and the nitrate is NO3. So you've got a lot of oxygens in there, and that's what happens and why it says here that it cannot be put out. And so what happens is when it's heated, it separates into N2O and water, and on higher temperatures, it separates into pure oxygen. So there's pure oxygen in there, and then when it has contact with fuel oil, which is a hydrocarbon base, your oxygen and your fuel will combine. And so then that means it will burn, and there's nothing you can do to put it out because the oxygen is part of it. And when it disassociates like that, which is the term that's used, when it breaks down into its components, it's exothermic, meaning it throws off heat. So if you have a fire underneath ANFO, what happens is it starts to break down. It produces its own oxygen. It becomes unstable. It generates heat. And so what you have is something called a runaway chemical reaction. And it goes from a fire to all of a sudden a big boom. And that appears to be what happened.
Like some people are familiar with the oxygen fueled fire. The typical place where we see that is it's someone in a residence on oxygen and they're smoking, or there's an ignition source, and the substances will burn much more readily. Stuff that won't burn in the normal 21% oxygen or that we're living and breathing in will burn violently in an oxygen-rich atmosphere. And of course, the case that comes to my mind, is Apollo number 1, where they were in the Apollo capsule doing a test run before takeoff in a 100% oxygen environment, and there was a spark, and the 3 astronauts were incinerated to death instantly, and they couldn't get at them fast enough, and there wasn't any flammables in the capsule. There wasn't any fuel oil or anything like that. It was just wiring and fabrics and stuff.
Well, the fuel was, the
The
astronauts were the
astronauts
fuel.
were the fuel. Yeah. So
Yeah, and if you think of the Texas City explosion, which was ammonium
yep.
nitrate, and how they fought that fire, and this was back in the
I think
20s, Paul, I
40s.
think it was 40s, maybe. Yeah, it was the ship was the
Yep.
ground comp, right? And so how they fought fire in those days in ships was this: they closed everything down. So they had a fire burning in the hold, which was full of ammonium nitrate. They closed it down and they injected steam, high temperature, high pressure steam. And so all that did was accelerate the exothermic reaction, and it just disintegrated chemically, spontaneously and very quickly, and tore the thing apart. So dangerous stuff.
Local codes at the time in Kansas City, the Fire Prevention and Protection section of the Kansas City Code. There are 2 articles that related to the blasting. Article number 3, blasting requires blasting permits to be obtained prior to doing any blasting within the city. This process, as prescribed by the ordinance, was handled by the city's engineer's office. That requires a determination be made that blasting could be accomplished without danger to life and property before issuing the permit, and the execution of a bond that would indemnify the city from damage must be received before the permit is issued. The Uniform Fire Code 1982 edition was referenced as well, and that had provisions relating to the storage, use, and handling of explosives and blasting agents. So, I mean, they were sort of following that, and we'll get into a little bit more of that here as we move along. Okay, I think it's Doug's turn.
Yeah, the fire incident. So, fire discovery and the fire department notification. Shortly after 3 a.m., one of the guards at the construction site thought she had seen a prowler and radioed the other guard. The 2, who were in separate vehicles, joined together, left their pickup near the parked contractor's equipment, and continued to search for the prowlers. Finding no prowlers on the site, the guards drove to a nearby convenience store to see if anyone there had seen 2 people come out of the construction site on foot. While the guards were at the store, a motorist stopped and reported that a vehicle was burning at the construction site. The guards returned to the site and found that the cab of the pickup they had just parked was involved in fire. Using the phone in his car, one of the guards called the Kansas City Fire Department at 3:40 a.m. and reported a fire in a small pickup on Highway 71 in the southbound lane. While this guard was talking with the dispatcher, the other guard noticed a fire on the hill. The tape recording of the telephone conversation captures in the background the second guard stating, "Oh, the explosives are on fire." Moments later, the original caller stated, there might be there's some explosives up on a hill that I also see now is burning." The dispatcher's reply, "Okay, we'll have units there, thank you." So the fire department response, at 3:42 a.m., the dispatch center started the initial response with this transmission. Dispatcher, Pumper 41, this is a pickup truck at south of Blue River and 71 Highway on the west side. Pumper 41 reported to be a pickup on Blue. It's just south of Blue River and 71 Highway on the west side. Pumper 41, use caution on your call. There's information that there may be explosives. It's in or at a construction area. The pickup truck may be in that area. Pumper 41, which would have traveled north on US 71 to reach the scene, arrived at 3:46 a.m. and at 3:47 a.m. radioed back to the dispatcher that there were 2 fires. The crew asked for a second pumper to be dispatched to the scene. The dispatcher acknowledged the transmission and sent Pumper 30, which would have traveled south on US 71 to reach the scene, and would have passed very close to Pumper 41 at the pickup truck fire. Pumper 30 arrived on the scene about 3:53 a.m. At 3:57 a.m., Pumper 41 radioed the dispatch center, reported that the fires appeared to be arson, and requested that the police be sent. Moments later, the following transmissions were made. 41 to dispatcher. The dispatcher said 41. Engine 41 said, "If you can get 30, tell them that there's a trailer on fire up there. Stay away from it, and we better have 107 out here." And 107 is the battalion chief. There's supposed to be explosives involved in this. The dispatcher asked if they wanted 107 emergency. Engine 41 said yes, send them emergency. Dispatcher dispatched car 107, reporting that the companies are south on Blue River on the 71 highway. Pumper 41's on the west side, and then repeated it to the chief again. 3:59, Pumper 30 asked the dispatcher if he could confirm that there were explosives in the trailer. The dispatcher responded with the following: Pumper 41 advised that, and we have additional information on the original call that there were explosives in the area and to use caution. Pumper 30 acknowledged the transmission and then asked to have 41 at their location when they were through. The dispatcher immediately asked 41 if they received the message, and Pumper 41 indicated they had and were en route to join Pumper 30. Like Pumper 30, Pumper 41 used the north access road, drove up the hill, and parked between Trailer 1 and Trailer 2. Apparently, Trailer 1 was heavily involved in fire, and at 4:02 a.m., Pumper 41 had the following conversation with Battalion Chief 107. 41, the way it looks right now, we're going to have to haul some water up there with a squad or something. We've got a trailer and part of a compressor going up here. 107 asked, "Do you need a four-wheel drive back there?" 41 said, "Yeah, you can get a four-wheel drive back in here." At 4:04 and 49 seconds a.m., Pumper 41 made the following transmission to Battalion Chief 107, who was still en route. "Apparently, this thing's already blowed up, Chief. He's got magnesium or something burning up here." The chief responded, 10-4, "Are you back up in there now, or where are you?" 41, "Yeah, 10-4, both companies are back up in here." "Can you get in off 71, the chief asked. "Right, it's a road they're using for construction here, the engine company." Chief said 10-4. Battalion Chief 107 arrived on scene at 4:06, drove up the north access road, and stopped near the guards who had parked their vehicle near the north end of the berm. From this position, the chief could see a trailer was glowing red, and then some firefighters were still pulling hose from one of the pumpers, and others had already begun to supply some water. The battalion chief's driver had left his car and was standing next to the other vehicle talking with the guards. Having sized up the situation, from his position at about 340 feet from the burning trailer, the battalion chief was preparing to have the pumpers leave the area when the explosion occurred. The blast was so powerful that the battalion chief's driver was injured. The guard's vehicle was pushed back about 25 feet, and the blast could be heard back at the dispatch center about 9 miles from the scene. At 4:08, Battalion Chief 107 made the following transmission. And he's probably a little more excited in his voice than I'm going to sound. "Explosion just as we pulled up in here. Get us all kinds of ambulances in here. Get us ambulances and at least three more companies." The dispatcher asked if he was reporting an explosion and if he was going to need extra companies. Battalion Chief 107 responded 10-4 and asked for ambulances. The dispatcher asked if they were for firefighters. He said, 10-4, we blowed the windshield clean out of our car and we're a quarter mile away. I can only imagine all these conversations in a southern drawl, which I'm not going to try to attempt to mimic. The dispatcher immediately sent 2 more pumpers, 2 quints, and a squad. He also contacted the department chief to ensure that he was aware of the explosion. In the same minute, the dispatcher reminded all responding companies to use caution going in. Apparently, there were explosives in the area. Apparently, yep. Battalion Chief 107 asked the dispatcher to confirm that pumpers 30 and 41 had been at the scene fighting the fire, and the dispatcher responded, 30's was, as far as we know, they were near the trailer. 41s was coming up to them. Battalion Chief 107 then called the pumpers over the radio, and there was no response. A few moments later, he gave these orders. Give us what hazmat expertise you have out here. Notify everyone that we want to keep everyone back away from the area until we know more about it. And if you can find someone from the people who are working here to see what we can find more about the area. The dispatcher contacted Kansas City, Kansas, which we said is right across, I think it's a river, is the border. The hazardous materials team and tried repeatedly to contact pumper 31 and 41, 30 and 41 crews, but nobody responded. A bright white fire producing white sparks of light continued to burn vigorously on the hill. Because firefighters were being held back, it was not possible to determine what was burning, what was being exposed to the fire, or how this fire was affecting the firefighters from the two pumpers, 30 and 41. 4:22 a.m., the dispatcher informed Battalion Chief 107 that they had received information indicating that there may be more depots of explosives in the area that had not exploded. Upon receiving this information, all personnel and apparatus were withdrawn from the area, and the command post and staging point was established approximately half a mile away at 95th Street. Even with the knowledge of the crews of pumpers 30 and 41 were still in the area of the fire, and the hope that they might still be alive, firefighters remained out of the area until they could be assured the area was safe for entry. At 4:48 a.m., the second explosion occurred without injury to firefighters. The bright fire continued to burn even after this blast. About 10 minutes after this explosion, the Kansas City, Missouri hazardous materials officer attempted to observe the fire area from a helicopter and determine if firefighters could successfully enter the area. Staying at what the officer thought was a safe distance, the observer could not clearly see the blast area due to the smoke and darkness. At 5:20 a.m., the hazardous materials officer who had completed his reconnaissance flight and another Kansas City Fire Department officer performed an on-the-ground recon of the blast area. They walked into the blast area, located the bodies of 5 of the 6 firefighters, observed that some of the unexploded material was scattered throughout the area and still burning, and left the area. Having confirmed the condition of the 2 pumper crews and being concerned about the presence of unexploded materials, these officers felt it would be best to keep all personnel out of the area until after sunrise. Between 6 and 6:30 a.m., it was decided there was enough daylight to allow personnel to see any potential dangers in the area of the blasts. Permission was granted to police and fire personnel to enter the fire scene. Most police officers entered the area from the north access road, and the Kansas City Fire Chief, the 2 officers involved in the on-the-ground recon, Battalion Chief 107, and representatives of the State Fire Marshal's office entered the scene via the south access road. By the time the fire department officers entered the area, the police had declared the site a crime scene and asked the fire department to limit their activities in order to preserve any evidence. Following the initial crime scene investigation by the police department, the bodies of the fallen firefighters were removed.
Thanks, Doug. Sorry that was a long and hard section to read. Such a devastating incident for all of our brothers and sisters in the service. The all six firefighters from pumper 30 and 41 were killed by the first explosion. The locations of the bodies is provided. I can provide a slide on that. The only person physically injured was the battalion chief's driver, who was standing next to the guard's vehicle on the north access road. This firefighter received minor injuries and was released from hospital the same day. Pump 41 was closest to the crater where trailer number 2 had once been. The majority of the vehicle's body was missing. However, the fire pump and occupant cab were still attached to the chassis. Remaining components of the cab were so heavily damaged that this portion of the pumper was almost indistinguishable. Rock, dirt, and other debris covered most of the wreckage of Pumper 41. Pumper 30 lay about 8 to 10 feet south of the other pumper, heavily damaged. It was recognizable, and the majority of the body components remained in their relative positions on the chassis. And there's some pictures of those in the report, which I'll share on our Facebook and social Twitter feeds. There was 3 craters that marked the location of parked trailers. 2 craters, one 38 feet across and 6 feet deep, the other 20 feet long and 4.5 feet deep, were formed when trailer 1 exploded. It is not known why the 2 craters were formed instead of one, but an imaginary line drawn between the center of the craters corresponded to the longitudinal axis of trailer 1 as it was reportedly parked. The third crater shows where trailer number 2 had been parked, 49 feet across, 6.5 feet to 7 feet deep, and a 20-foot elongation at one point. The cause of the elongation wasn't known. It's assumed that direction of elongation corresponds to the longitudinal axis of the trailer. Any pieces of the trailers that were found away from the craters, the 5-foot long piece that happened to be part of a trailer frame was about 60 feet southeast of trailer 1. A large piece of trailer body with explosive manufacturer's name still printed on it laid near the position where the battalion chief had parked his car. They were fortunate that they didn't get injured where they were, even 340 feet away. Many small pieces of trailer body were found on the berm. Several pieces landed on the highway, US 71, and some observed pieces had small puncture holes, were bent inwards as if an outside force has caused the damage to the trailer skin. The pickup that was parked against the trailer was heavily damaged, with the cab peeled back almost to the box. The cargo box was blown out about 40 feet away from its original location. The air compressor and one of the drilling units were damaged, but apparently remained near their original locations. Another drilling unit was dismembered by the blast, and parts of this unit landed on the wreckage of Pumper 41. The portable light trailer was blown up and almost through Pumper 30. Reportedly, a 3x4 foot piece of metal from the body of one pumper landed approximately 25 feet south of 87th Street, so a long ways away. Pieces of debris that this investigation termed observed furthest from the blast area were part of the trailer body and the tailgate from the pickup truck that was parked near the trailer 1. These were found along the north side of 87th Street, 450 feet from trailer 1. In addition, Battalion 107's car, which was 340 feet from the blast, was notably damaged. Some distances report that these may have been greater. People 10 miles away from the construction site said that they heard the first blast, and the majority of broken windows and damaged structures occurred to buildings within 30 blocks of the blast area. I looked up how many pounds were in the Beirut explosion when you were doing your part there, and it was 6 million pounds. It was 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate. So it was a lot more, but still, this is a large amount of stuff in an urban area. The cause and origin investigators have determined that the fires in the pickup truck and the first trailer were intentionally set and were proceeding with arson and homicide investigations. Preliminary information from investigations indicates a flammable liquid was used as an accelerant in the cab of the pickup and is suspected in the fire was started outside of trailer number 1. At the time of the report, the case is still under investigation and no suspects had been identified. Supplemental, as of February 2022, just a year ago, the Kansas City Star reported that records have been released by the Justice Department through court order show that investigators found new information more than 10 years ago to suggest that 2 security guards may have been involved in the 1988 arson-fueled explosion at the construction site. So, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on media. If you go a little bit digging, I think you found some Denny that talks about this ongoing saga. Initially, people were charged, and then there was new evidence that came out again 10 years ago, and it wasn't released right away. And now they're, but why? But why? They didn't agree with the thing, or just because, or yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the fire growth and the explosions themselves. And some of this, of course, is based on the investigation because it was pieced together afterwards. So if the fire involving trailer number 1, which was the first trailer to detonate, if it was started by a flammable liquid, as the local investigators and the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which is a federal agency, investigators believe, it appears that the fire outside the trailer would have melted a small portion of the trailer's exterior aluminum walls before it could burn through the 1.5-inch thick floors. So if you had a fire under the trailer and near the outside of the trailer, it would be burning at the floorboards, but it would also be lapping up with the heat around the side. So what they're saying here is the aluminum wall would have failed first. So once a hole was burned through, the exterior fire then would have had access directly to the contents of the trailer and could have caused ignition of the contents in those trailers, which was ANFO, I remind you. So it does burn. The fire involving trailer 1 probably was beyond the incipient stage and rapidly growing at the time that the guard actually saw it from her position, where she was standing near the burning pickup truck, which was some 800 feet to the west. So from her position, the hill and the berm on top of the hill would have hidden the trailer from her direct line of sight. Therefore, in order for the guard to have seen the fire, there must have been some substantial flames that could be seen over the top of the berm, with enough smoke to reflect light coming from the flames or sufficient light to brighten the area. So when she saw the fire, there was already some substantial fire. There must have been. So firefighters, when they arrived, found an extremely intensive fire when they actually arrived at the burning trailer, which was reported by the firefighter. Although Pumper 30's crew never described the fire over the air, a member of Pumper 41's crew implied a severe fire when he requested that additional water be brought to the scene. Apparently, he felt the water carried on each pumper was not sufficient. The firefighter from Pumper 41 provided even more confirmation of an intense fire when he radioed that it appeared the explosion had already occurred and that magnesium or something was burning. The battalion chief's recollection of a glowing red trailer corroborates Pump 41's apparent assessment that the fire was intense. So if the side of the trailer had failed, they'd be actually looking into the heart of the fire.
Yeah, you might have the ribs standing up and no sheeting on the outside.
Yeah. Plywood lining the interior of the trailer walls and the hardwood floors are not capable of producing a fire of the intensity described by firefighters. We've all seen what burning wood looks like.
Yeah.
But this apparently did not look like that. Under normal conditions, aluminum alloys used for the construction of trailer bodies will melt at about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. The molten materials may have formed pools in the trailer or on the ground, but this material would not have burned. It appears the only other available fuel was then the ANFO and the ANFO plus aluminum mixtures stored in the trailers. So the ANFO with the aluminum in it might have created a bright fire. When the firefighter from Pump 41 reported that it appeared the explosion had already occurred and that magnesium or something was burning, the firefighter probably saw that part of the trailer was actually missing, but it would have been as a result of melting aluminum from the walls and not actually because of an explosion. The burning something would have been the ANFO and ANFO plus aluminum mixture. Again, this is speculation from the investigators. The ANFO and ANFO aluminum mixture in Trailer 1 burned intensely for about 30 minutes before the detonation occurred. Again, as I talked earlier, that rapid chemical runaway decomposition starts to occur. The fragments of trailer siding that were found on the berm, remember the berm separated the highway from the site, indicated that Trailer 2 was heavily damaged by the blast that occurred in Trailer 1. The blast in Trailer 1 occurred first, the blast in Trailer 2 occurred later. Unburned pieces from Trailer 2 were thrown clear of the blast and the fire area, and many of these pieces had evidence of being struck on the outside by rocks and were bent inward by forces outside of the trailer. So like shrapnel. If the observed pieces had been from Trailer 1, one would expect to find evidence of an internal pressure forcing the trailer walls out. So if the blast had, if these pieces they found had been trailer 1, then they would have been bowed outwards. Instead, they were bowed inwards. So they think they were definitely from trailer 2. A blast force sufficient to blow the fragments from trailer 2 into the berm would have also caused shock stress on the commodities stored inside trailer 2, which was again ANFO and ANFO aluminum. Remember, the 30,000 pounds was in this trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Shock is one of the factors that can affect the sensitivity of ANFO mixtures, making it obviously more prone to detonation. In addition, the blast force would likely have upset the storage arrangement of the materials in trailer 2. So, nicely piled on the pallets, some of them probably thrown off. Some of the material could have been blown around inside the trailer or outside of the trailer, because remember, they observed some of that. But most of the material probably stayed in a pile inside the trailer. It appears that the first blast ignited the ANFO plus aluminum mixture in trailer 2, and once ignited, the material burned intensely for about 40 minutes, and then it detonated. As was the case during the fire in trailer 1, the ANFO plus aluminum mixture was the primary fuel for the fire. Just a short note here, 2 other incidents that highlight the hazards associated with explosives and blasting agents under fire conditions occurred in Roseburg, Oregon, and in Marshalls Creek, Pennsylvania. I don't remember those particular incidents, Paul.
Because we were too young. 59 and 64.
Well, I'd like to say I was too young, but let's move on. In August 59, a truck exploded in Roseburg, Oregon, killing 13 persons and injuring 125. The truck was loaded with a blasting agent that was ANFO and also dynamite. It had been parked overnight next to a building materials warehouse. So, like a big box store these days.
Yeah.
The fire department was fighting a fire in the warehouse, not uncommon, and was not aware of the truck and its dangerous cargo just parked up against it. Fire exposure then detonated into the explosive materials, and that detonation destroyed a 12-block area in the community.
Oh my gosh.
An assistant chief and a police officer were among those killed. 45 buildings were involved in the ensuing conflagration.
Wow. That's when we
This
may
was
have
in
to do that one.
1959 in August.
I've been
And
to
in
Roseburg, Oregon.
Have you?
Yeah,
I've not.
yeah.
And in the Marshalls Creek, Pennsylvania incident in 1964, and again, another transportation-related incident, sort of, 6 people were killed, including 3 firefighters who had responded to a reported truck fire. This time they knew the truck was on fire. The truck driver was hauling a trailer truckload of nitrocarbonitrate, which is essentially ANFO.
Yep.
It's aluminum, it's ammonium nitrate with organics added, coal, fuel oil, something, and dynamite, and blasting caps. Apparently the rule of keeping blasting caps in with your explosives was not a thing then.
Transportation, anything goes.
Right, and he experienced 2 flat tires. Wait for it. He left the truck to seek assistance. During his absence, the tires caught fire, obviously had a brake fire or overheated the tires, which then exposed the trailer and its cargo. The explosion occurred after the arrival of the fire department. Firefighters did not know that explosives were involved. The adequacy, clearly, of placarding was an issue in this incident.
Of course.
I'm not sure when the DOT requirement for placarding.
That was in the 80s.
Something worth looking into.
It was in the 80s, I think, that came in. And I was thought of something while you were talking about that, and I can't remember it. But, I mean, it's similar. In West Texas and in Beirut, the fire burned for a while before the explosions occurred. The same kind of thing we're seeing from these ANFO fires and explosions is that they get heated up, And then once they get heated up, the chemical properties start to react, and then you get the violent explosion.
Well, even in the Halifax explosion in 1917,
Yeah.
which happened before the atomic age, was the largest single explosion that had happened before the atomic age. And that fire had been burning for a while, and the ship had actually drifted ashore, and the fire department had responded, was on scene before it finally detonated. And I don't think it was ANFO involved in that one, but there was lots of Nazi stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, instead of going the opposite direction, they went towards the fire. Silly thing that firefighters do, and in this case, it's a difficult outcome.
Exactly. So some discussion points on this end. The many questions remained unanswered, of course. The issues the firefighters have to consider when responding to hazardous materials incidents. We used to teach an acronym: STOP and be safe. Stop and first evaluate. But why did both crews attempt to attack the fire in the trailers when there was no life hazard, when the fire was apparently more intense than a fire involving an ordinarily combustibles, and when there was a mention of explosives in the area? We'll never know, right? Did the appearance of trailers, standard over-the-road trailers without placards, special colors, or visual cautions, increase the potential hazard in the minds of the responding firefighters, maybe? If I recall correctly, magazines, like those two other magazines that you talked about, they have to be brightly colored, identified, and stuff. But the trailers, of course, even though they were sort of technically a magazine, they weren't identified.
The thing that I find interesting is that if you go back and look at the radio transmissions, Pumper 30 specifically identified over the air that there were explosives and to stay away. Yet they were the first ones who actually drove into the site, followed by 41. It's odd that they changed their mind.
Yeah, it is. Did they realize an explosive material, there could be fuel for a fire and burn to destination over time? Did they know the proper safe emergency procedures? Those are all questions that come up here. They talk about, the following the incident, Kansas City Fire Department examined its current policies and procedures to identify methods to prevent this type of occurrence in their community. The fire department spent several weeks reviewing and evaluating most of the changes before they were enacted. Almost immediately after the incident, the city fire marshal determined how many permits for blasting were active in Kansas City. He learned that the city engineer's office had record of 64 active permits, though the fire department was only aware of 2 blasting permits before the inquiry. Wow, there's a gap if I've ever seen one. This discovery led to activities designed to improve communications between the city engineer's office and the fire department.
I was going to say, it sounds like the gap between unoccupied properties and the fire department.
Yes.
In many cities, the fire department is unaware of how many unoccupied properties there are.
Yep.
Even though city officials are aware.
Well, it goes back to Baltimore, the one we did last year, where they had started a program to mark the houses that were abandoned or unoccupied and do not enter, but they didn't have the funds for the signs. So they discontinued the program, and then there's been 1 or 2 or 3 occasions now where firefighters have been killed in abandoned buildings in Baltimore. I mean, yes, they're searching for possible vagrants, who started the fire, all those kind of things, but they didn't identify. They were unoccupied. We had a similar instance in Fort Saskatchewan. We had a fire at it was what they call it a pilot project. And so when a chemical company wants to do a new process or something to achieve some sort of a chemical product, they will build a scale model, a big pilot project, on a small scale, the size of a house. We had a fire at one. They were using sodium metal. Liquid metal. Basically, it's at normal temperatures it's a solid, and when you heat it up to use it, and it's not very common.
Often used as a cooling, though.
Cooling, excellent cooling properties. Don't get me started into the whole Hyman Rickover and the sodium reactors and stuff. But anyway, And we had a fire middle of the night at this place, and our firefighters showed up. And fortunately, there was a sign at the road that sort of gave the officer, he had that, his spiny senses were tingling. There was a bunch of hazardous materials symbols on the sign, so he stopped and waited, which was awesome because they could have been hurt if they would have went in there. There was no water on the site. In violation of the code. How they got a permit to have the site there, I don't know. That was before my time, but they had to do a whole bunch of hoops before they could rebuild and get a permit to do it. Same kind of thing here.
So I think the lesson there is that most of the information the fire department would like to know about sites, it's in the city somewhere, and a lot of the information that city officials would like to know is in the fire department somewhere.
Yeah.
I think the case to have common databases across building, development, engineering office, fire department, and all those officials to have a common database where everybody shares information with everybody else is a vital project that every city or municipality should really, really be interested in and should really work hard to do.
Yep.
To be able to look up this information. And it's one of the things I did when I was a fire chief was gather as many of these databases and make sure that I could access them sitting in my car at the scene,
right,
pulling up information. And lots of times I found stuff that I was really glad I had found.
Yeah, we were trying to do that in Fort Saskatchewan, and we actually had gotten a grant to try out a new software package. It's a company out of Ottawa, APX Data, and it's a really super easy, friendly, iPad-based, Google Maps kind of based pre-planning and inspection software. And we thought if it was super easy to use and it was tools that people use every day, then we started dumping all kinds of info in there. I don't know if they're still using it, but any way we can get that information at fingertips level.
Like programs like CityView have been around since the early 2000s. So we're talking 20 years now.
Yep.
So it's hard to imagine an adequate excuse for not having something like that in place.
Resources, I imagine. The fire department imposed the following requirements for storage of explosives in the city limits. Before a permit is issued, the applicant must submit a site plan of the proposed explosive storage area. An 8-foot fence with barbed wire must be constructed around the entire perimeter of the storage area. All points of the fence must be at least 6 feet from the storage building or trailer, and an area which the fence must be clear of debris and other combustible materials. We used to run into that on a lot of oil and industrial sites, is that keeping the fence area clear so you don't get a ground fire going into the site.
Yeah, weeds.
Yeah, exactly. The magazines within the storage area must be placarded with a sign meeting Department of Transportation requirements, even though it's not transportation. So it's kind of hard to enforce that one because it's not a DOT requirement, but you can always do a bylaw. Of course, the NFPA placarding is quite common in some sites, but again, it's not a code requirement here in Alberta, for example, to NFPA or placard your chemicals. You can get away without it.
Wemyss would take over.
This is as close as you can get is Wemyss, yep. But when it's a pipeline or a tank, again, Wemyss is sort of a, they might not do it. You think of it for the stupid spray bottle, but not for the tank of toluene.
Yeah. If I was a local authority, I'd be making sure that it was there.
Yep. Magazines must be placarded. In addition to imposing these requirements, the fire department will periodically inspect all explosive storage facilities. Changes to the storage facility will require a resubmittal and reissuance of a storage permit. The tragedy in Kansas City prompts a re-examination of lessons from past experience. It's clear for decades that the hazards of blasting agents in fires have been recognized by the fire service. Such recognition is reflected in the identification systems and operating procedures. Today, there's an appropriate focus on training, planning, emergency response procedures to a broad family of hazardous materials. Codes, standard, and procedures are available and need to be applied to avoid such tragic events from happening in the future.
Conclusions. The incident involving the storage of blasting agents illustrates the potential hazard to firefighters and other users under certain fire exposure conditions. This incident also points to several key lessons for the fire service and those concerned with explosions, blasting agents, or other potentially hazardous materials. Blasting agents such as ANFO can be extremely hazardous when exposed to fire and can detonate. Prior to the alarm, the Kansas City Fire Department apparently did not have specific or knowledge of specific details such as the type, quantities, and location of the blasting agents. Permit systems for storage and the use of explosives or blasting agents must include notification to the fire department. Number 3, it is a normal practice to remove hazardous materials warning signs once an over-the-road trailer has reached its destination. Better marking of the areas of storage or the trailers might have saved lives in this case, given the lack of detailed prior knowledge about the location of the dangerous materials. In addition to the notification of the fire department about the location of the explosives and the blasting agents through a permit system, adequate pre-fire planning conducted by firefighters can serve to locate hazardous materials throughout a department's jurisdiction. Such data gathering and inspections can find unexpected dangerous materials before an emergency occurs and thus save lives of firefighters and civilians. A few other significant events involving ammonium nitrate: Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada; Texas City, Texas in 1946; the Oklahoma City bombing; the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993; West Texas; and Beirut, Lebanon.
So it's interesting when you look at those, like Halifax was 1917, Texas City, Texas, the ground comp was 46, Oklahoma City 95, World Trade Center was 93, West Texas was 13, Beirut was 2020. It's been going on for 100 years.
Yeah, we're not learning our lessons.
It's still happening.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, those are just the big ones we know about, right? I mean, there's lots of little ones we probably haven't heard about. So beware, right? That's why 472, now 1072, is mandated training for all firefighters to at least the awareness and operations level in to be a level 1 firefighter, because the risks are, I mean, everywhere.
Situational awareness, it's key. It keeps you alive. It's so important to be situationally aware and to know what's in your first due district. Doesn't matter whether the fire department knows officially something's going on. You're driving down the street, you see something, pull in, ask questions.
I like that. That's the big thing, is take the time with your crew to look around, and if you see something change in your district, like you say, pull in, have a boo, right? You've got the authority.
When you get back to the station, haul out the duty book, write a note to the other platoons so that when they come on shift, they see it and they go look at it when they get a chance. Because it's all fine and good here in Canada that you know about it, but you're not even 25% of the responders.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You're only one shift, and you're not even all of the shift. So you really, really, you got to have methods for passing that on. There should be a day book that sits in the platoon chief's or the captain's desk, and all these things are written down as they occur. It's all well and good that you know about it, but everybody needs to know about it. And if that means an email to everybody working the shift, do it, man.
ICS procedure, ICS 214 form, activity log. And what does the oncoming person do? They review the activity log of the previous person to see what they were aware of. Just that whole situational awareness. Dr. Rich Gassaway, of course, goes all over North America teaching that. And that's why we do the podcast, is hopefully while you're running or walking the dog or whatever, you hear about this and you go, oh, never really thought about that. I'm going to have to look at that construction site that I drove by yesterday.
Yeah, and if you're on the radio and you hear somebody say something that isn't right or is missing something important, like we discussed in Lima, people were on the radio saying stuff that wasn't correct.
Yep.
And nobody was correcting them, even though the person who knew better was there. Right. So, something, say something.
Repeat it back, and if you don't understand it, ask questions. That's Doug's favorite, is repeat it back. Acknowledge.
Get on, and say, pump 21, were you aware?
Thanks, everybody, for listening to another Emergency Traffic Podcast. We appreciate your interest and hope you find them interesting and informative. Give us a star, a like, a thumbs up. These mean a lot to us. They help the algorithms to find our podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Podcast Traffic or our Facebook page. You can email us at emergencytrafficpodcast@gmail.com. Be safe out there.